Chapter 7. New Patients. The call Tommy was waiting for actually didn't end up being a phone call at all. It happened in a text. It was evening. Moonlight filtered through the window, lighting up the carpet with glowing white lines. For once, Tubbo and Ronbu weren't out doing whatever it was they got up to when it was late. Instead, they were there. Tubbo was working at his computer, head tilted so close to his screen Tommy debated yelling at him about how he was going to damage his eyes. Ronbu was settled on the couch next to Tommy, legs propped up on the coffee table and playing Mario Kart on the beat-up Nintendo DS he found for cheap at a garage sale. Tommy, meanwhile, was trying to sew a patch onto Tubbo's sweatshirt because he got a hole in the armpit, and they couldn't afford to buy any new clothes right now. It was quiet and peaceful. There was a buzz from Tommy's phone. He sighed and put down his sewing needle, digging into his pocket to take it out. When he saw the notification blaring across the screen, though, his mouth went dry. Unknown number. Is this the number for the healer? Crap. Oh, crap. It had been almost 2 weeks since his run-in with Blade and Zephyrus, and Tommy was starting to think they'd given him a break after all. That was stupid of him. He should have known this was going to come back up sooner or later. Clenching his jaw, Tommy glanced at Ronbu from the corner of his eye, and was relieved to see he was still focused on his DS. Carefully angling his phone away from the boy, Tommy typed out a shaky response. Tommy. Yeah, it is. Who is this? The reply was almost instantaneous. Unknown number. A friend of the Blades. I need help, and fast. Where can I meet you? Swallowing down a lump in his throat, Tommy bit back a groan and dropped his head against the couch cushion. Shit. Tubbo and Ronbu were here, meaning he couldn't bring whatever villain this was back to the apartment to heal them up. Where the hell could he go where they wouldn't be found? Tommy checked the time on his watch. It was a bit after midnight, and he had closed the cafe a little over an hour ago. Every other shop in that area was closed, and Tommy had the keys to the place sitting in his back pocket. A plan was forming in his head. He wasn't thrilled about it. Tommy, can you get to the Cloudy Cafe? I can send you the address. Unknown number. I know where it is. Tommy, get over there and head to the back alley behind the cafe. I'll meet you there in a few. Unknown number. I don't care if the syndicate is fond of you. If this is a trap, I'm going to make you regret it. Tommy gulped, staring at the threat on his screen. Whoever he was dealing with, they didn't seem to be in a very cheerful mood. Tommy, this isn't a trap. I'm not a fucking idiot. Unknown number? Fine. See you soon. Dropping the phone on his lap, Tommy took a shaky breath and dragged his hands down his face. Great. Now he had to get to the cafe to heal another supervillain who may or may not kick his ass if they got too suspicious of him. You okay? Ronbu's concerned voice made Tommy's head whip up. I'm fine, Tommy said immediately, shoving his phone in his pocket. I just remembered that I forgot to put the milk back in the fridge at work. I need to go now before it goes bad. Wait, you're going back to the cafe? Tubbo asked, spinning around in his chair to frown at Tommy. It's late, one of us should come walk with you. I'll be fine, don't worry about it. Tommy reassured, waving them off as he jumped to his feet. I mean, would Puffy really be that upset over one thing of milk going bad? Ronbu asked, his frown mirroring Tubbo's as Tommy slung his backpack over his shoulders. Well, we're running low, Tommy lied, beelining towards the front door. We're not scheduled to get another delivery till the day after tomorrow, and I don't want us to run out of milk in the middle of the day. Tubbo and Ronbu still seemed skeptical, but Tommy was in a time crunch here. I promise I'll be fine. I'll text you when I'm on my way back, he promised. And before either one could protest, he swung open the door and rushed out, hurrying down the hallway without looking back. That could have gone a lot better. Tommy hated the way the guilt about lying to his friends clawed into his chest, But he knew he couldn't exactly tell them, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to the cafe to heal some supervillain because I've kind of fallen into business with the syndicate unwillingly. Do you want me to pick up groceries on the way back?" It would be fine. Once again, Tubbo and Ronbu had their secrets, and Tommy had his. The night air was cool against his flushed cheeks as he hurried down the sidewalk. He tightened the straps of his backpack, glad he'd remembered to throw a miniature first aid kit in there exactly for one of these situations. While he didn't feel great about volunteering Puffy's cafe to be his makeshift clinic, it wasn't like he had a much better option besides the literal alleyway next to his apartment building. At least this way, he could clean up any spilled blood, and knew they wouldn't be disturbed while he was doing his work. As his footsteps pounded against the sidewalk, a stabbing pain under his ribs protesting his fast pace, Tommy wondered who was going to be waiting for him when he got to the cafe. All they said was that they were a friend of the Blades. While usually he would take that to mean Siren or Zephyrus, if it was one of them, they would have just told him. This had to be someone he hadn't met before, but he couldn't think of any villain off the top of his head, outside of those two that had connections to the Blade. Nerves buzzed in his chest like bees, swarming him with their worries and making him second-guess what the hell he was doing. He knew the syndicate wasn't going to hurt him, since they thought they still owed him for saving Siren, but this new villain might not follow that same logic. This person could be volatile, and Tommy might end up getting screwed over before the night was over. Well, if he got his shit rocked, at least he could, probably, count on Siren kicking some ass on his behalf in revenge. Siren seemed like the type of guy to do that. Finally, he reached the cafe. From the front, nothing seemed amiss. The blinds were drawn shut, the lights shut off inside, just like he'd left it. After checking to make sure no one was watching, Tommy unlocked the front door and darted inside, making sure to lock it again behind him. Then he headed straight to the back room, dropping his backpack onto the table and taking a deep breath as he stared at the door that led to the dumpster in the alleyway behind the shop. There was a villain waiting on the other side of that door for him. Tommy shook his head to try and clear that thought. There was someone hurt waiting on the other side of that door for him, waiting for help. That was how he should be thinking of this. This was a person first, and a villain second. He needed to remember that. Dragging his hands through his hair, Tommy forced himself to take several deep breaths, counting in his head, just like Puffy had taught him. Then, he stepped over to the door to the alley, and didn't let himself hesitate before he swung it open. Tommy wasn't sure what he expected to see on the other side, but it wasn't this. There were two people. One was a woman, bright pink hair tied back into a tight ponytail, with strands falling loose around her face. The upper half of her face was covered by a gold metal mask shaped like a V with no visible eye holes to be seen, yet Tommy knew she could somehow see out of it anyway. The only part of her face that was visible was her lips, which were pressed into a thin line, acting as the only thing that betrayed her nerves. When Tommy saw the other person with her, though, his stomach dropped. A guy was laying across her lap as she sat pressed against one of the walls of the alleyway. His face was covered by a gray bandana and a pair of goggles with one lens that was red and another lens that was blue. But what caught Tommy's attention was his chest. The remains of what had once been a sweatshirt barely clung to his skin, the charred fabric looking as though it had partially melted onto his skin. Burns were littered across his entire torso, and the sight alone made Tommy want to gag. He recognized these two. It was Arson and Iceman, two villains that weren't as intimidating as the Syndicate, but were well known nonetheless. Arson, the woman, stiffened as soon as Tommy opened the door. "Are you the healer?" she asked, her voice tinged with metal by the voice change pressed against her throat. "Yeah, that's me," Tommy breathed, unable to tear his eyes away from the charred figure that was Iceman. He cursed. "Yeah, I know," Arson muttered, shifting so she wasn't leaning against the alley wall anymore. She seemed wary of him, looking past his shoulder and into the back room behind him, but still asked, "Can you help me get him up? I carried him here, but I don't know if I can carry him more." "Shit, yeah, of course, let's get him inside." Tommy rushed forward, kneeling down to help pick up Iceman. He grabbed Iceman's legs, while Arson got his upper half, and together they carried him into the back of the cafe. As soon as they were inside, Tommy set Iceman down on the tile floor, cursing himself for not grabbing a towel or something to put him on instead. In the fluorescent light of the back room, the burns somehow looked even worse than they had outside. They wrapped around his torso like vines, carving scars into his skin that Tommy knew even the strongest healer couldn't fully erase. Shutting the back door behind them, Tommy then dropped to his knees next to Iceman, reaching forward to press his fingers against his throat. There was a pulse there, fluttering weakly against his fingertips. At least he was still breathing. "What the fuck happened to him?" Tommy asked, already looking for a way to try and get the sweatshirt off of him without aggravating the burns even more. "It was Flame," Arson said softly, kneeling on the other side of Iceman and clutching his hand in her own. "We got into a fight with him, and he just landed a perfect hit on Iceman. I just barely managed to escape with him in my arms." Tommy clenched his jaw. Flame was one of the top heroes. He couldn't imagine a top hero purposefully giving someone an injury this horrific. "Isn't Iceman supposed to be immune to fire?" Tommy asked, grabbing a pair of scissors from his first aid kit to try and cut the sweatshirt off of Iceman's chest. "Like, he's got fire powers, so why can he get burnt?" That was the one strange thing about Arson and Iceman that Tommy never understood. Iceman had fire powers, able to conjure up flaming projectiles and surround himself with them to send off toward his enemies, while Arson had water powers and could drown someone just by wrapping a bubble of water around their head. Their names didn't make any sense. "Flame's fire is different than most," Arson explained, rubbing her thumb over Iceman's knuckles. "We call it hellfire. We don't know why, but it can burn Iceman, and it can burn him badly. He's gotten hurt before by it, but never like this." "You can say that again. Most burns like this would kill someone," Tommy muttered as he peeled away some of the fabric. Arson turned her face away from Tommy, although he couldn't see her expression because of her mask anyway. He actually stopped breathing, and his heart stopped before you got here," she said in a low voice. "But I was able to bring him back." Tommy paused what he was doing to look at Arson, and noticed the way her lip had been bit to the point of bleeding. "Did you perform CPR?" he asked, having a strange feeling that there was something she wasn't telling him. Arson was silent for a moment, and bit her lip again. Tommy winced when he saw another bead of blood well up from the wound she had there. "Kind of. I did chest compressions, but I also encouraged his blood to flow again." Tommy blinked. "What do you mean?" "Blood is partially made up of water, meaning I can control it if I need to," Arson admitted, keeping her face angled towards the ground. "So I made his blood move through his heart again." "You've got to be fucking kidding. Arson could control blood?" "Is that okay?" Arson then asked, when Tommy didn't say anything. "His blood is flowing on its own now. I'm not doing it anymore. Is that okay that I did that? Will it hurt him in the long run?" "I'm gonna be honest, I have no fucking clue if that'll have a long-term consequence, because I'm not exactly experienced with bloodbenders," Tommy said, forcing himself to look back at Iceman and take off more fabric. "If his heart is beating on its own now, it should be fine. Either way, I'm glad you did it, because I can't do shit once someone's heart stops beating." "I try not to manipulate blood if I can help it. It disturbs me to be able to control someone like that. I only use it in life-threatening situations," Arson explained, sounding strangely defensive. Another scrap of fabric was peeled off of Iceman's chest, revealing burnt pink tissue with a few patches of black here and there. Tommy winced, hoping the third-degree burns were few and far between. "Did you do that to Flame so you could escape?" Tommy asked, keeping his eyes down. Arson sucked in a breath, but after a moment of silence, she released it. "Yes," she whispered. "I've never used it on a hero before today because I didn't want them to know I had that ability. I'm probably going to be moved on top priority after tonight." She paused, and Tommy stayed quiet to let her collect her thoughts. "Though I don't think we're going to be going out for a while after this." Tommy nodded, setting the last swath of fabric aside. "Yeah, it's probably going to be best for you guys to lay low. I can heal him so he's stable, but he's still going to need time to heal these burns on his own, and he'll have permanent scarring. As long as he's alive, that's what matters," Arson muttered, mostly to herself. Well, no point in delaying the inevitable. Tommy's gaze skimmed over the burns one more time, and he tried to hide his grimace. It was going to suck ass healing this. Healing the minor burns on his hands from when he worked wasn't a big deal, but something as severe as this was going to take a lot out of him. Taking a deep breath, Tommy placed his hands as gently as he could on Iceman's now bare chest. Then he closed his eyes. Arson stayed silent as he healed Iceman. He heard her soft gasp as his hands began to glow, but didn't open his eyes to see her reaction as he focused on spreading the energy over Iceman's burns. His head began to pound almost immediately, with a strange warmth building up in his hands that quickly became painfully hot. Still, he forced himself to hold on, knowing he only had this one shot to heal Iceman tonight before he was too exhausted to try again. His head throbbed as Tommy's heart pounded in his ears. He was grimacing in pain now, and lights began to dance behind his eyelids. If he kept this up, he was going to pass out. Like with Siren, Tommy stopped right before it became too much. Gasping for air, Tommy threw himself away from Iceman, curling up against the wall and burying his face in his knees to try and catch his breath. "Fuck, that hurt," Tommy muttered, clenching his jaw as a wave of nausea rolled over him. "Are you all right?" Arson asked. "I'll be fine," Tommy spit out between his teeth. "Just give me a..." Another nauseous spike, and Tommy was on his feet, pushing past the way his legs shook like jelly as he darted for the sink in the corner of the back room. As Tommy puked into the sink, he felt a hand rest lightly on his back, drawing gentle circles over his shoulder blades and helping him tether himself back to reality. After another minute, Tommy lifted his head from the sink, clutching the sides of the basin to keep himself upright. Arson seemed to notice his struggle and wrapped her arm around his back, walking him back over to where Iceman was still on the ground and setting him down so he was sitting against the wall. The cold tile floor was heavenly against his sore hands, and Tommy squeezed his eyes shut as he tried to catch his breath. The back room was silent as Arson waited for Tommy to recover. His head was spinning, but Tommy forced himself to take deep breaths, knowing it would pass if he gave himself time. He heard Arson stand up again, but couldn't summon the energy to ask what she was doing. There was the sound of a cabinet opening, followed by running water, and soon there was something cool pressed into his hand. "Drink some water," Arson instructed. Cracking open his eyes, he saw the villain crouched right in front of him, helping him hold a glass of water she'd gotten for him. She helped him lift it to his lips, and the water was heavenly for his pounding head. Nodding in encouragement, she kept a hold on the bottom as he downed the entire thing in one go. Then she put the glass down on the ground next to him when he was done. The water settled into his system, and Tommy's head finally stopped spinning. He opened his eyes completely and saw Arson had moved back over to sit by Iceman. "Thank you," Tommy muttered, straightening up against the wall and wincing when it sent another bolt of pain through his skull. "How's Iceman?" "He looks a lot better," Arson told him. Looking over at the two, Tommy could see that Arson was right. While the burns on his chest were still numerous, there were no more third-degree burns that he could see. There were a few second degrees still, but the majority had been reduced to first-degree redness with a bit of blistering. Along with that Where Iceman had been barely breathing before, now his chest was moving up and down at a steady pace, as if he was just sleeping. Although Tommy now felt like shit, at least his healing had worked. Iceman was going to live another day. "How long until you're feeling better?" Arson then asked, glancing up at Tommy. Tommy shrugged. "The worst should pass in 10 minutes or so." "Then we'll stay with you until then. I want to make sure you can get home safely," Arson said. Tommy opened his mouth to argue, but could tell, by her tone, that wasn't going to work. Plus, he didn't really have the energy to insist he was fine right now, and figured it wouldn't be bad to have some company while he waited for his head to stop throbbing. "Can I ask you a question?" Tommy spoke up, after a moment, figuring this was the opportunity to ask about something he'd always wondered about. "Shoot," Arson replied. "What the hell is up with your names? I mean, you have water powers, but you're named Arson. And he's got fire powers, yet he's named Iceman. Why'd you guys do that?" Tommy asked, furrowing his brow. "It was Iceman's idea," Arson muttered, her tone betraying a hint of amusement as she squeezed her friend's hand. "He said we could be like Greenland and Iceland. You know, with how Greenland is actually covered in ice while Iceland is super green, and they were named that to confuse outsiders." She shook her head, a smile barely quirking at the corners of her lips. "It's ridiculous. But it does take people by surprise, so I suppose it does the job." Tommy snorted. "I guess it works, yeah. But it's still kind of stupid." "Believe me, I'm aware," Arson said, although she was giving a fond smile to Iceman. Silence fell between them once more. Iceman's breathing continued to be steady, a rhythmic in and out of whooshing air as Arson sat quietly beside him. Tommy had no idea how long it was going to take him to wake up, but he wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't for a few hours. Tommy's head rested against the wall, trying not to wince as his eyes drifted up towards the fluorescent lights. "Thank you." Arson's whisper cut through the silence, like a hot knife, demanding attention without any dramatics. "Thank you for saving him." The thanks was so sincere, so heavy on Arson's tongue, it made Tommy squirm. You're welcome, but it wasn't a huge deal. Besides, it's not like I have much of a choice in this," he said, laughing awkwardly. "That's not true," Arson said, keeping her gaze fixed on Iceman. "You could have called the cops and had them waiting here for me. You could have called someone when Blade and Zephyrus showed up at your apartment. Or you could have left Siren to bleed out in that alley, and no one would have known you were there. But you didn't. You chose to help all of us, despite who we are. That deserves a thanks." Tommy wrapped his arms around his knees. "You're making such a big deal out of it. I'm just doing some healing. It's not like it even takes that much out of me most of the time." Arson smiled, but there was something sad in it. "You don't understand how valuable you are to us, Tommy. Villains don't have anyone to patch them up after they get hurt. Heroes can go to expensive doctors they have in the hero tower. Vigilantes can sometimes go to the hospital, depending on the nature of their injuries, or can find an independent healer and pay them to help. But villains rarely can do anything except patch themselves up and hope for the best. Most healers turn us away, and hospitals usually can recognize the wounds caused by hero fights. If a villain gets mortally wounded, that's usually it for us." But you guys don't get that badly hurt all that often, right? Heroes aren't supposed to try and kill you. They just try to incapacitate," Tommy pointed out. "Tommy." Arson's voice was flat, but non-judgmental as she pointed to Iceman. "Did this look like a wound meant to incapacitate, or a wound to kill?" Tommy blinked, knowing what the answer to the question was. "And with Siren," Arson continued before he could speak again. "That hole in his stomach, again, did that seem like a wound meant to incapacitate?" There were a few beats of silence before Tommy shook his head. "The media lies to you," Arson said softly, tracing a finger up Iceman's arm. They tell you that the heroes are noble, that they're the ones you need to look up to. But many villains aren't doing this because we like to hurt people. We have a reason for choosing our side. We're just trying to do what we need to do to survive, but we're getting killed off. One by one. Are you saying that heroes have killed villains before? Tommy asked, unable to hide the horror in his voice. Arson nodded. Yes, they have. And if you hadn't saved Iceman, he would have been another death they covered up. Nausea was creeping up Tommy's throat again, but this time it wasn't because of his powers. It was one thing to have his suspicions, but it was another thing entirely to get them confirmed. He'd thought that Siren could have been hurt in a fight with a hero, but he wasn't sure about it. Now he knew that was exactly what had happened, and that it had happened many times before as well. The media had been lying to them. All of them. We need you, Tommy, Arson then said, when Tommy was silent. Of course, you're not going to be forced to do anything you don't want to do, but we need you so much more than you realize. A faint groan from the floor tore Tommy's attention away before he could respond, and Arson was immediately kneeling over Iceman, grabbing his face in her hands and trying to meet his eyes. Iceman? Iceman, are you awake?
Fucking hell.
Iceman muttered, his hoarse voice difficult to make out through his voice changer.
I feel like I got baked in a fucking oven.
Arson let out a relieved laugh, and Tommy noticed a stray tear roll down her cheek. Yeah, you probably do.
What the hell happened?
Arson slammed her hand over Iceman's mouth before he could finish the word. We're not alone, Iceman, Arson told him, jutting her chin in Tommy's direction. She lifted her hand from Iceman's mouth, and he nodded, turning his head to the side so he could see Tommy. This is Tommy, she explained. He healed you. Hey up, big man, Tommy greeted.
Hey up,
Iceman replied, albeit a bit weakly.
So you're the kid that saved Siren, huh?
Tommy sighed. Does everyone and their mother know about that? Everyone in our circle does, Arson told him with a soft laugh.
I guess that means a lot of villains owe you one,
Iceman commented, making no moves to get up as he continued to meet Tommy's gaze.
Which includes me.
Seriously, it's fine. Don't worry about it, Tommy grumbled, knowing it was too late to insist that he didn't want to get involved in their world, but still hating the idea of having a favor owed to him because he helped someone.
Well, thank you anyway,
Iceman said, nodding at him.
Though I think it's about time me and my partner here get going, because this floor is really fucking uncomfortable.
Pausing, Iceman glanced around the room, and Tommy could just make out the frown behind his goggles.
Wait, where the hell are we?
The cafe I work at, Tommy explained, straightening up against the wall as he prepared to stand. My roommates were home, so I couldn't bring you to the apartment. I do the closing shift here, so I had the keys to this place, and figured it would be the next best thing.
Convenient,
Iceman muttered. It was then that he glanced down at himself, noticing the burns for the first time.
Ooh, that ain't pretty.
Then his frown deepened.
Wait, where the fuck is my shirt?
I kinda had to cut it off you, Tommy explained, sheepishly pointing to the fabric strips that sat near Iceman's feet. Hope you weren't attached.
Oh, damn it, I really like that one,
Iceman whined. We'll get you another one, Arson reassured him. But for right now, I think we should focus on getting you up. Do you think you can stand? It was a struggle for Iceman to get to his feet. He let out a rather impressive string of curses when moving tugged at the burns on his chest. And if Tommy wasn't still a bit dizzy, he probably would have tried to heal him more. Finally, though, he was standing upright, leaning into Arson, who had both her arms wrapped around him. Can you guys make it back all right? Tommy asked, having stood up himself, and was now leaning against the wall for support. Yeah, we'll be fine, Arson reassured him. Though, do you think you could let us change into our civilian clothes? It'll be easier for us to walk down the street that way. Tommy blinked. Oh, shit, of course. Don't worry, I won't look or anything. Thanks, Arson smiled at him, and Tommy felt warm inside. A few minutes later, from the front part of the cafe where Tommy had gone while the villains changed, he heard a muffled call from the back room of, "We're leaving now," and Tommy yelled back a goodbye. The only thing he saw as he opened the door to the back room was a flash of pink hair as Arson and Iceman slipped out into the alley. Figuring he should give them time to get far away before he started heading home himself, Tommy set about cleaning up the remains of the two villains, so Puffy and Foolish would be none the wiser when they came in for work tomorrow morning. There wasn't much blood on the floor, thanks to the fact that burns usually didn't bleed all that much, but Tommy still wiped the entire back room down with a mop just in case. He also made sure to clean out the sink he'd puked in, and ended up grabbing himself another glass of water to lessen the headache that was now pounding behind his eyes. He was still dizzy, and his head hurt like a bitch, but Tommy didn't actively think like he was going to pass out, so that was a plus. The only real challenge was going to be getting home, because even just standing for a few minutes to clean up was making his fatigued legs shake violently. While Tommy knew the logical thing to do was to call Tubbo or Ronbu, that was going to open up way too many questions about why he was suddenly very ill when he'd been fine less than an hour before. If he could just make it back to the apartment on his own, he could just pretend he was really tired and pass out as soon as he got home. Yeah, he could do that. Hopefully. Shutting off the lights in the cafe again, Tommy stumbled back out to the front of the shop, his keys jingling in his pocket. Once he was out in the cool night air, he gasped in relief, the breeze wicking away the sweat that had formed on the back of his neck. His hands shook as he twisted the key into the lock, his forehead resting just a bit too heavily against the cool glass doors. Shit, this was going to be harder than he thought. Tommy was mentally preparing himself to push away from the door when there was a rustling sound from above. Before he even got a chance to look up, there was the sound of footsteps slamming against the concrete, and Tommy whipped around to see who was there. He didn't expect to find himself face to face with a vigilante. Nuke was taller in person than he seemed on TV, although that was probably because he'd always been standing next to Ender, who seemed to be a literal giant. His gas mask covered his entire face, with yellow lenses over the eye holes. Tommy noticed that the guy had similar hair to Tubbo, with the bleached ends and the overgrown brown roots. Huh. Guess Tubbo's style wasn't as unique as he thought. "What the fuck, dude?" Tommy yelped as soon as he'd gathered his thoughts somewhat, still putting most of his weight against the glass doors. "You gonna scare a man after death like that?" "Sorry," the vigilante yelped, his voice also tinged by his voice changer. "I didn't mean to scare you, I swear." "Were you just sitting on the roof of this place waiting for me to come out like a fucking creep?" Tommy accused. "No, I wasn't. I was just, in the area, and I saw you going inside earlier, and since it's so late, I thought I'd just keep an eye to make sure everything was all right. You know, vigilante duties and all," Nuke explained, letting out a nervous chuckle. Tommy narrowed his eyes. There was no way Nuke would have been able to see Arson and Iceman enter or leave from the front of the store, as the alley led out onto another street entirely. Plus, a vigilante would ask him if he'd spotted two villains heading towards the cafe, right? This had to just be a weird check-in. He hoped that's all it was. "Well, you checked and everything's fine. I work the closing shift of this place and I forgot some stuff, so I came back for it, so you can leave now." Tommy snapped, not having the energy to deal with a vigilante right now. "Are you sure? You were in there a long time," Nuke pointed out. Tommy bit back a curse, trying to think of some excuse he could tell Nuke for why he'd been in the cafe for so long if he was just grabbing stuff he forgot. I got sick," he finally admitted, figuring it was at least partially true. "Threw up and all that nasty shit. So I really just want to go home so I can go the fuck to sleep." "If you're sick, are you okay to walk back on your own?" Nuke asked, taking a step closer to him. "If you need, I can walk you home. I'm fine," Tommy spit out, hoping the vigilante couldn't see his legs shaking as he gripped the door handle. "You really don't seem fine," Nuke said, looking him up and down. "In fact, you kinda look like shit." "Your face looks like shit," Tommy snapped back. You can't even see my face behind my mask, Nuke argued. Yeah, but I bet it looks like shit. I bet you don't get any ladies because they all think Ender is cooler since he's taller than you. Tommy pushed, saying whatever the hell came to mind to try and get the guy to leave him alone. Nuke snorted. I'm not exactly looking for ladies right now, but okay. Oh, you swing the other way. Good for you, man. Live your truth. That's not what I... Nuke cut himself off, sighing deeply and shaking his head. Fine. You want to walk back on your own? I'm not going to stop you. With that, Nuke took a step back, gesturing for Tommy to start walking down the sidewalk. After a few beats of staring down the vigilante, it was clear he wasn't going to leave until Tommy proved he could make it down the street without tipping over. Clenching his jaw, Tommy pushed away from the door, ignoring the way his legs screamed in protest. He managed one step onto the sidewalk, followed by another, but when he went for a third, his leg immediately crumbled under the weight. Before he could fall face first into the concrete, there was an arm grabbing him and yanking him upright. Tommy leaned heavily against Nuke, thinking it was a bit ridiculous considering how much taller he was than the vigilante, yet the guy didn't seem to struggle with supporting his weight at all. Yep, thought that would happen, Nuke muttered, grunting as he threw Tommy's arm over his shoulders. All right, where am I taking you? While Tommy wanted to argue, he knew full well that if Nuke weren't here right now, Tommy would probably just end up sleeping on the sidewalk for the night. Down that way, he said, pointing towards his complex. Nodding, Nuke started in the direction he gave, with Tommy stumbling against him. The two were silent for a few minutes of walking. Tommy was focusing too much on putting his legs in front of each other so he didn't fall again, because the last thing he wanted was for Nuke to pick him up bridal style. After they'd made it about a block, though, Nuke seemed to tire of the silence because he spoke up. So, nice weather we're having, right? Tommy raised an eyebrow at the expressionless mask. Seriously? You're making small talk about the weather? Well, the silence was awkward and I wanted to say something. I'm not an Uber driver you can just be quiet with. You're the one who insisted on helping me home, Tommy exclaimed. Yeah, because you were going to pass the fuck out if I didn't, Nuke shot back. Tommy groaned. Don't be so dramatic, he muttered, although he knew Nuke was probably right. Where's your tall friend anyway? Don't you guys usually do your patrols together? Oh, Ender? Nuke let out a nervous laugh. He's, back at home. Things seem a bit quiet, so I decided to take the patrol on my own. Huh. So the fight Arson and Iceman had with Flame wasn't something Nuke knew about. You didn't hear about anything going on? Tommy pressed. No villain sightings or hero sightings or anything like that? Nuke slowed his walking pace down, turning his head to glance at Tommy. No, I didn't. Did you see something? Tommy debated what he should and shouldn't tell Nuke. On the one hand, Nuke's job was to fight villains, meaning he probably shouldn't mention that Iceman had been hurt. But on the other hand, Nuke wasn't a hero either. He didn't have any obligation to the Hero Committee, and wasn't as likely to just blindly take their side in any altercation. That was what Tommy had always liked about vigilantes. They weren't bound to the stupidity of the Hero Committee, but still helped people all the same. I thought I saw Arson and Iceman at one point, Tommy said carefully, keeping his tone casual. It was from far away, but I could have sworn I saw them going at it with Flame. You saw Arson and Iceman fighting Flame? Did you report it? Nuke asked. Tommy shrugged. Like I said, it was from far away, and Arson and Iceman dipped pretty quickly from what I saw. Plus Flame was there, so I just figured he had it handled. That's weird, though, Nuke muttered, shaking his head. I'm usually able to intercept police radio transmissions so me and Ender can find out where shit is going down, but I didn't hear anything about Flame being sent out tonight. Arson's words flashed in Tommy's mind again. If you hadn't saved Iceman, he would have been another death they covered up. He thought back to the night he saved Siren. There had also been no news about that fight. A picture was starting to form in Tommy's head, and he really didn't like what it was turning out to be. "Hey, you okay?" Nuke's voice dragged Tommy back to the present. "Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm fine. I zoned out there for a second." "It's all right. I think we're almost there, though," he said, gesturing with one hand to Tommy's apartment building. "Yeah, this is it, big man," Tommy told him. Nuke dragged him up to the front door of the building, and Tommy was actually able to stand on his own as he dug in his pockets for his scanner. "So, are you good now?" Nuke asked, shifting from foot to foot. "Because if you can make it back to your apartment from here, I'm going to go." Tommy snorted. "I'm going to give you a terrible Yelp review. The vigilante Nuke only dropped me off in front of my apartment building instead of walking me to my door like a wrong'un. I give him 1 out of 5 stars. "Oh, fuck off. I should be getting 5 out of 5 stars for walking a poor sick child home." Nuke shot back, and Tommy could hear the smirk under his mask. "Excuse you, bitch. If anyone's a child between the two of us, it's you," Tommy exclaimed. "You look like you're 12 years old." "What? Is it because I'm short?" "Yes, it's entirely because you're short. You're so small, you're probably even shorter than my friend Tubbo, and he's one of the shortest people I know." Nuke huffed. "Well, I bet Tubbo isn't all that short at all, because I know I'm not short either. I'm perfectly average." "Sure you are. You look like a toddler next to Ender." "Everyone looks tiny next to Ender. He's unreasonably tall." "I'll believe that when I see it, bomb boy." Tommy laughed, using his scanner to unlock the door to his building. "Now go off on the rest of your patrol and save a cat from a tree or some shit." "You're a very ungrateful citizen," Nuke said as he walked away from the building. "Name's Tommy, bitch, don't wear it out." Right before Tommy shut the door to the apartment building, he saw Nuke flip him off and chuckled to himself. Although he was annoyed that he'd needed help walking back, that had gone a lot better than he expected. Thankfully, Nuke hadn't questioned him too much about why he'd been at the cafe so late at night, and he'd actually been kind of fun to talk to. If Tommy wasn't in the habit of helping some very illegal villains, he wouldn't even mind actually befriending the vigilante. But it just so happened that he was in the habit of helping villains, and he had a strange feeling Nuke wouldn't be too thrilled if he found out about that. Tommy sat down on the floor of the elevator as it tugged him up to his floor. It was a monumental effort to push himself back to his feet, and the only thing that kept him from falling over in the hallway was the promise of his warm bed that was so tantalizingly close. He just needed to make it a few more steps, and he would be able to pass the fuck out and kiss his headache goodbye. His hand landed on the doorknob, and he almost started crying in relief. When he tried to twist it, though, he was met with resistance. The door was locked. "Tubbo!" Tommy yelled, slamming his fist on the door. "Ranboo! Someone let me in, I forgot my key!" From inside the apartment, he could hear something fall over, and then footsteps were rushing towards the door. "Sorry, Tommy, 1 second. Ranboo called back, his voice strained. The doorknob jiggled as Ranboo tried to open it, but somehow his attempt didn't result in the door swinging open like it should have. "Ranboo, seriously, let me in," Tommy said, pounding on the door again. "I'm trying," Ranboo stammered. I think the lock is jammed." "Then try harder to open it," Tommy yelled, his legs starting to shake again. There was another crash from somewhere in the apartment, and Tommy frowned. "Ranboo, what was that noise?" "Oh, nothing. Tubbo just dropped something," Ranboo said, still jiggling the doorknob. "Well, wherever he is, can you get him over to the door so we can fucking open it? Since he's not the one with noodle arms over here." From inside the apartment, he heard a door slam shut. Then the doorknob twisted, and it swung open to reveal a harried-looking Ranboo. "Got it," Ranboo said, in a voice that was way too cheerful. Scowling at his roommate, Tommy shoved his way inside, his head spinning as he dropped his backpack onto the floor. Right as he crossed over to the couch, he saw the bathroom door open, and Tubbo stepped out with red cheeks and damp hair. "Oh, hey, Tommy, you're back," Tubbo commented, rubbing at his hair with a towel. "What took you so long?" "I feel like shit," Tommy said in lieu of an answer. I'm going to go to bed before I pass out on the floor. Rambo, you're sharing with me tonight, right? Yeah, I think so. But are you all right? All right, I'll put earplugs in so I don't get woken up by your weird horror movie sleep talking. Tommy grumbled, once again ignoring the question his roommate asked. While he knew he owed them more of an explanation than what he was giving them, he was pretty sure that if he stayed standing for another minute, he was literally going to pass out. In the morning, he could tell them the same thing he told Nuke. He went to the cafe and got sick while he was there. Probably just ate something bad, nothing to be too concerned about. Maybe he'd also mentioned that Nuke walked him home. After all, Tubbo seemed like a bit of a Nuke fanboy, considering how he perked up whenever the vigilante was mentioned. If he could distract his roommates with the fact that he met Nuke, then hopefully neither of them would push for more information about his night out. Tommy didn't bother turning on the lights as he stumbled into his room. Instead, he collapsed face first into the blankets and was out as soon as his head hit the pillow.